Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
Imagine you're a business coach living in a quiet, leafy suburb of Paris.
Right. Just a totally normal everyday life.
Exactly. I mean, your biggest professional worry should be, losing a corporate client to a competitor.
Or maybe like getting a bad review online or something.
Yeah, exactly. But instead, your business rival pays 70,000 euros to active duty military parachutists to literally murder you in your driveway.
Which is just, it's completely insane.
It really is. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tearing into a stack of reporting, court documents, and public commentary that exposes a truly cinematic underworld.
Oh, it really feels like a movie.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're looking at how former Secret Service agents, active police officers, and members of a secretive Masonic lodge are allegedly running private hit squads.
Right now.
In plain sight, in modern France.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that this isn't Hollywood fiction. We are not talking about like a street gang or a cartel.
No, not at all.
This is a highly documented, systemic issue of rogue state actors operating within one of the world's most developed democracies.
Which is terrifying when you really think about it.
It forces a complete reevaluation of the institutions we trust. I mean, the very people trained by the state to protect society are essentially, turning their lethal skills into a freelance service.
A gig economy for assassins, basically. Let's start with the event that actually cracked this entire underground network wide open.
Because it really plays out like a dark comedy before it gets terrifying.
It really does.
Yeah.
So we're going back to July 2020 to that Paris suburb I mentioned earlier, Puteaux.
Right, and the target was Marie Hellandini. And again, a business coach.
Yeah.
She wasn't, dealing arms. She wasn't hiding state secrets.
Just a normal person.
Exactly. But outside her home, police notice something suspicious and end up arresting two men. And these aren't just local thugs.
No, they're not.
They are highly trained soldiers from France's parachute regiment. They are sitting in a car, heavily armed, just waiting for her.
And when the police, tap on the window and bring them in for questioning, the soldiers don't lawyer up.
Which you would expect them to do.
Right. They don't invoke their right to remain silent. They just lay their cards on the table and say, hey, we're on official government business.
They genuinely tell the investigators they've been deployed by the French state to eliminate Dini.
Because she is supposedly a high-level operative for the Israeli spy agency, Mossad.
Which is, completely fabricated.
Oh, entirely made up.
Their handlers fed them this whole spy thriller narrative to justify the hit.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The reality was a completely mundane business rivalry.
Just a local dispute.
Right. Think about the absolute absurdity of that. It's like two local real estate agents fighting over a lucrative housing development.
Yeah.
But instead of, cutting their commission rate to win the bid, one of them just hires a military hit squad to take out the other.
Wildly disproportionate.
It is. And the rival business coach who wanted Dini gone was a 69-year-old man named Jean-Luc Bagour.
And Bagour didn't just, look up hitmen on the dark web or something. He utilized a network he already trusted.
Right.
He was the venerable master of the Athenor Masonic Lodge.
A Freemason.
Yeah, Freemason. He took this 70,000 euro contract to a fellow lodge member, a 53-year-old entrepreneur named Frederick Valio.
So Valio was kind of the guy in the middle.
Exactly. Valio essentially functioned as a middleman. He took the contract and went to Daniel Bouley.
And he's a retired spy, right?
Right, a 72-year-old retired agent for the DGSI, which is France's domestic intelligence service.
Wow.
Bouley then brought in an associate, Sébastien Leroy, to handle the active searchers on the ground.
Okay, so it operates perfectly like a general contractor building a house.
That's a great way to look at it.
Right, like Bagour's the homeowner with the cash. Valio's the general contractor who oversees the project.
Yeah.
He subcontracts the intelligence gathering to Bouley, the retired spy.
Who then subcontracts the actual manual labor.
Trigger pulling.
Exactly. The trigger pulling to Leroy and the active duty soldiers. They built a subcontracted military.
And they used the Masonic Lodge as the ultimate camouflage, which is just brilliant in a dark way.
Oh, it really is. A lodge is built on absolute secrecy, strict hierarchy, and a sworn oath of brotherhood.
Perfect for covering your tracks.
Right. If you are going to run an organized crime syndicate comprised of wealthy professionals and intelligence officers, that structure provides the perfect cover.
For clandestine meetings and, transferring untraceable funds.
Exactly, under the guise of fraternal charity or business networking.
And that camouflage allowed them to operate for years. I mean,
Yeah.
the botched hit on Marie-Helene Dini wasn't their first rodeo.
Not at all.
The sources map out this massive historical pattern of escalating violence committed by what the media started calling the Athenor Mafia.
They were basically functioning as a full-service shadow agency for lodge members.
So walk us through that escalation.
Well, they started with what you might call corporate enforcement. In one instance, Leroy's gang physically assaulted a businesswoman in the street.
Just to steal her laptop, right?
Exactly, simply to steal her laptop, presumably for corporate espionage.
Wow.
And by 2019, they were escalating to arson. They actually firebombed a car.
A car firebombing. Over what?
Because the owner had uncovered evidence of financial fraud linked to Jean-Luc Bourgueur's coaching company.
So they just burning the problem away.
Yeah.
And then we hit 2018, 2 years before the Dini plot, where they could cross the ultimate line.
The murder of Laurent Pasquale, a professional racing car driver.
That's so dark.
His remains were discovered dumped in a forest. The alleged motive behind his execution was an unpaid debt he owed to friends of Valio, our middleman.
So the capability for lethal, cold-blooded violence was well established long before those parachutists parked outside Dini's house.
Oh, without a doubt.
Okay, I have to pause here, because looking at the list of the 22 defendants in this trial is breaking my brain.
It's a very unusual demographic for a crime ring.
Right. We have 4 officers from the DGSE, that's France's Foreign Intelligence Service. We have 3 active police officers.
A doctor.
A doctor. An engineer. These are people mostly aged 30 to 73.
Yeah.
They have pensions, they have established careers, they have 0 criminal records.
Totally upstanding citizens on paper.
You don't just wake up at age 65, look at your retirement portfolio, and decide to start a murder ring for 70,000 euros.
No, it doesn't make logical sense.
Especially when you divide that 70K among a dozen guys. They are risking life in prison for what amounts to the price of a used Honda Civic.
Right.
Why on earth are they doing this?
That is the exact question that stumped the public and investigators initially. There's actually a piece of YouTube commentary in our sources where the host is practically stammering.
Just trying to make sense of it.
Right. Struggling with the cognitive dissonance of upstanding millionaires coordinating hits.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, it wasn't about the money.
What was it about then?
It was about ego, power, and a masterclass in psychological manipulation. You really have to look at how a former intelligence officer like Bealey manages younger assets.
So how does an old retired spy convince a young active soldier to basically throw his life away?
By exploiting the veil of state authority. Look at Sébastien Leroy's defense while he was in police custody.
What did he say?
He argued he was completely manipulated by Bealey. Leroy genuinely believed he was carrying out highly classified, legitimate government work.
He thought he was the good guy.
Exactly. He thought these were official black ops and that participating would fast-track him to becoming an official DGSI informant.
But wait, wouldn't an active soldier notice the lack of official paperwork? Like, would they realize they aren't getting briefed in a secure government facility, but rather by some old man in a cafe?
Well, in the world of covert operations, the lack of paperwork is the proof that the mission is highly classified.
Oh, wow. I didn't think of that.
That is the genius of the manipulation. When a decorated senior intelligence veteran tells a younger soldier, hey, this is entirely off the books, we have no official support, but the Republic needs you to eliminate an Israeli spy.
Well, the conditioning kicks in.
Exactly. The conditioning of their military background takes over. They are trained not to question the chain of command.
So they feel like they've been chosen for something elite.
They think they're James Bond saving the country, when in reality, they're just running errands.
Deeply sinister. They weaponized the soldiers' patriotism against them.
They really did. And the fallout of that manipulation is incredibly messy. The trial itself has become this tragic, convoluted legal maze.
How so?
Well, Bealey, the retired spy who allegedly masterminded these recruitments, actually attempted suicide while in police custody.
Oh, man.
He survived, but suffered a severe disability and impaired concentration.
So he can't even testify properly.
Right. So the prosecution is struggling to extract reliable information from the very architect of the network.
Which leaves a massive gap in understanding the full extent of who else they might have targeted.
Exactly.
But the danger of these rogue agents doesn't stop at domestic business disputes over coaching clients.
No, it goes much wider.
Because if a 69-year-old local business rival can pool some cash and buy a French hit squad, Imagine what a foreign dictator with millions of dollars in state funds can buy.
Right. The exact same species of ex-French intelligence operatives are being utilized for geopolitical assassinations.
It's the exact same skill set.
We are seeing a shadow economy where the skills learned in the French military are sold on the open market to sovereign states wanting to silence dissidents on French soil.
Which takes us to the Republic of Congo.
Eh.
And we need to be really clear here that we are just reporting what the sources say, looking at both sides neutrally.
Of course.
So, President Denis Sassou Nguesso has been in power there for a combined total of nearly 35 years.
A very long time.
Right. And decades of authoritarian rule naturally produce vocal political opponents. Many of them fled to France.
Believing it to be safe.
Right. One is General Ferdinand Mbao, a 62-year-old dissident. And Mbao isn't just dealing with online trolls.
No, the threat is very real.
He literally has a bullet lodged near his heart from an assassination attempt right in France back in 2015.
And the doctors determined it was too dangerous to remove the bullet because of its proximity to the heart.
So he just lives with it.
He lives with that physical reminder every single day. And the threat never vanished. Just recently, 2 former agents from the DGSE.
Again, French foreign intelligence.
Yes, they were charged with criminal conspiracy and possessing explosives.
And the target of their alleged plot.
General Mbao.
It's crazy. And they don't just go after high-ranking military generals. Anyone causing a headache for the regime seems to be fair game.
Yeah, the threshold is quite low.
Look at Roland Lévigny, too. He's literally just a logistics worker living in France who heads up a group called the Outraged of 242. He started posting YouTube videos walking around the Mediterranean city of Nice, filming palatial luxury properties that he claims are secretly owned by the Sassou Nguesso family.
Just filming houses.
Just for posting videos of mansions, Nitu was physically beaten up on his way to a protest.
That's awful.
He receives daily death threats. The harassment got so bad, his parents back in Congo had to go into hiding.
It demonstrates the terrifying reach of a regime that refuses to let geographic borders stop its intimidation tactics.
Now, obviously, this is a fiercely contested geopolitical issue. General Mbao's camp and groups like Nitu's point to these explosives and beatings as undeniable proof that the Congolese state is hiring hit squads.
Right, that's their claim.
On the flip side, the Congolese government in Brazzaville categorically denies any involvement whatsoever outside their borders.
They reject it entirely.
Their official stance is that they have absolutely zero motive to risk a massive international incident with France over a YouTube video or an exiled general.
The official diplomatic lines are always drawn very neatly. But regardless of the political denials from Brazzaville, the concrete, documented fact remains.
Which is?
Former French intelligence agents, trained by the French Republic, were caught and charged with possessing explosives in a plot against a political refugee living in France.
Okay, I need an ELI 5 on this. Like, explain it like I'm 5.
Sure.
Why France? Why do these dissidents flee their home countries thinking Paris or Nice will be a safe haven, only to find themselves hunted by the very French operatives they thought were supposed to be protecting those borders?
Well, you have to understand the historical context of Francafrique.
Okay.
For decades after the official colonial period ended, France maintained a shadowy, unofficial web of influence over its former African colonies.
Like backroom deals.
Exactly. It was a system where the French state would essentially prop up favorable African leaders, offering military and intelligence support in exchange for exclusive access to natural resources and lucrative contracts.
I see.
It was a deeply intertwined relationship involving spies, mercenaries, and a lot of dirty tricks.
So French intelligence agents have a long, long history of operating in the shadows of African politics.
Exactly. More recently, French presidents from François Hollande to Emmanuel Macron have publicly vied to end Francafrique.
To clean it up.
Right, they promised a new era of non-interference. And because of those promises, dissidents like Mbao believe the democratic institutions of France will shield them.
They believe they have crossed an invisible barrier into safety.
Yeah, but they haven't, because the authoritarian regimes don't need official French government support anymore.
They just bypass the Élysée Palace entirely and go straight to the open market.
Exactly. They hire the retired French spies directly.
Which is just a dark gig economy for ex-spies.
It really is. The French state spends millions of euros and decades of time training an officer in the arts of surveillance, counter-surveillance, and lethal force.
Right.
When that officer retires, those highly specialized skills don't just evaporate.
They still know how to do all of it.
And if there is no oversight, that officer becomes a private mercenary. The state has inadvertently subsidized the training of the very hitmen who are now undermining its own sovereignty.
The protectors become the predators.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? Which brings us to the core thesis of this entire deep dive and why this matters so much to anyone listening right now, regardless of whether you live in Paris, New York, or Tokyo.
It has global implications.
It does. Jean-William Vézinet, the lawyer from Marie-Hélène, the business coach who survived the botched hit, said something that perfectly captures the horror of this.
What was the quote?
He said, "What my client found terrifying is the fact that the key figures in this case are precisely the people who are supposed to act for the good of society."
Wow. This raises an important question because that, quote, shatters the illusion of institutional trust.
It completely breaks it.
We navigate our lives based on an implicit assumption of safety. When you see a police cruiser, a military uniform, or when you read about the intelligence community, you assume those individuals operate under a strict, unyielding rule of law.
You assume the monopoly on violence is held responsibly by the state.
Right.
We sign a social contract, basically.
Yeah.
We give up our right to personal vengeance, and in exchange, the state promises to keep the monsters at bay.
But what happens when the state's own agents decide to privatize the violence?
Yeah, the boundary between national security and a private mafia isn't a fortified wall. It turns out it's just a swinging door that can be pushed open if you have the right connections at a Masonic lodge and 70,000 euros in a briefcase.
It reveals a catastrophic systemic failure in how we handle lethal expertise. Society trains these individuals to do things normal people cannot do.
Right.
But what happens when they retire? What happens when their ideological loyalties shift or they simply get greedy?
There's no safety net.
Without rigorous, lifelong oversight of former intelligence and military personnel, a democracy basically leaves a loaded weapon lying on the table for anyone to pick up.
And the camouflage they use is our own cognitive bias.
Yeah.
We refuse to believe that a 70-year-old retired civil servant or a respected doctor could be orchestrating a firebombing or a shooting in the woods.
Because it doesn't fit our mental model.
Right. They hide behind the respectability of their titles and the assumption that, upstanding citizens don't do these things.
They absolutely rely on that public naivety. The infrastructure of violence is deeply human. The titles people hold, doctor, intelligence officer, venerable master, they do not inoculate them against corruption.
We've covered a lot of ground today. We started with the surreal image of two active-duty parachutists waiting outside a suburban home.
Unraveling that whole Masonic network where business rivals subcontracted espionage and murder.
Yeah, and we looked at how the powerful psychology of black ops can trick soldiers into becoming hitmen.
And we scaled that up to the geopolitical stage, where the exact same gig economy of retired French spies is weaponized to hunt political dissidents with explosives.
It is a profound reminder of the extreme fragility of the trust we place in the systems meant to protect us.
It shows that vigilance can never be outsourced entirely to the state, because the state is made of people, and, well, people are fallible.
As we wrap up this custom-tailored deep dive, I want to leave you with a final chilling thought to ponder on your own.
Okay.
Everything we've discussed today revolves around physical violence, guns, explosives, arson, physical intimidation.
Right.
But think about the trajectory of our world. We live entirely online. If a local business coach and an exiled general can both become the physical targets of highly trained state-level operatives acting as mercenaries today, what does this mean for our digital lives tomorrow?
Oh, that is the next invisible frontier of this shadow economy.
Imagine a near future where these rogue intelligence networks realize that physical hits are too messy, too risky.
So they pivot.
Exactly, they pivot, offering cyber warfare, digital framing, and data assassination as a service.
To anyone with a fat checkbook.
Your business rival doesn't send parachutists to your house. Instead, a former NSA or DGSE cyber specialist plants illegal materials on your hard drive.
They drain your bank accounts.
And permanently erase your digital identity. How safe is anyone's reputation, livelihood, or freedom in a world where the cyber-mercenary framing you for a crime is the exact same intelligence officer who built the justice system's digital infrastructure?
It's a terrifying prospect, and it really underscores why identifying and dismantling these rogue networks in the physical world is so critical.
Before they evolve into something far harder to catch.
The ultimate invisible enemy.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a heavy one, stepping out of the comfort of our daily routines to peer into a real-life spy thriller where the villains are wearing the uniforms of the good guys.
It's been wild.
Stay insanely curious. Keep questioning the world around you. And remember, sometimes the plot of a John le Carré novel isn't fiction. Sometimes it's just the morning news. We'll catch you next time.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.